If you walked into a room today and completely forgot why you were there, that moment probably was not your memory failing at all. It was your brain running out of bandwidth. And I am going to show you a 10-second reset you can use right now to clear that fog and get your thought back. Here is what most people never realize. The brain works like a phone with too many apps running in the background. And when too many things are draining your mental battery, you get slowdowns, freezes, and blank screens. But none of that means the phone is broken. Today, I am going to walk you through 9 surprisingly common triggers that steal your brain's bandwidth and make you feel like your memory is slipping, when really your recall is just being hijacked by fixable, everyday things hiding in plain sight. Every single one of these triggers can be improved, and by the end of this video, you will have a simple plan to test which ones might be affecting you. In a moment, I am going to give you a 60-second memory fog check you can do with me right here, and I will also reveal a medication timing question that catches most people off guard, plus one tiny home change that can noticeably improve your recall, and it takes less than 5 minutes to set up. Before we get into all of that, drop a comment and tell me your age and where you are watching from today, because I always love to see who is here and where in the world this information is traveling, and it helps others find this video too. Let us start with your 60-second memory fog check. And I want you to do this with me right now because it is simple and actually quite interesting. I am going to give you 3 words, and all you need to do is hold on to them in your mind while we keep talking. Then later, I will ask you to recall them. The words are apple, table, and penny. Just let those sit in the back of your mind. Apple, table, penny. And we will come back to them in a few minutes. Now, one of the most common bandwidth stealers I see in my patients is something that sounds obvious but almost everyone underestimates. The quality of your sleep, not the quantity. You might be getting 7 or 8 hours, but if those hours are fragmented, if you are waking up multiple times, if you are spending time on screens right before bed, or if your sleep schedule is wildly inconsistent from one night to the next, your brain never gets the deep restorative phase it needs to consolidate memories and clear out mental clutter. What this feels like is waking up already tired, feeling mentally foggy in the morning even though you technically slept, and struggling to recall names or details from the day before. A quick clue is to notice whether you feel refreshed or drained when you first open your eyes. And if the answer is drained, more often than not, sleep quality is worth investigating before you assume anything is wrong with your memory. A simple swap here is to set a consistent wake time, even on weekends, and to stop screen use at least 30 minutes before bed because the light and stimulation from devices delay your brain's natural wind-down signals. Another bandwidth stealer that I have talked about before and will only mention briefly is dehydration, because many people over 60 are walking around mildly dehydrated without knowing it, and that alone can make your thinking feel sluggish and unclear. One quick check I often share is to notice whether you get that sticky feeling when you swallow, like your mouth is just a little dry and your saliva feels thick, because that is often an early sign that your fluid levels are lower than ideal. And sipping water throughout the day rather than waiting until you are thirsty can make a noticeable difference in mental clarity. But here is something that often surprises people even more. What happens after you eat can steal bandwidth for an hour or two without you realizing it. Blood sugar swings, especially after meals that are heavy in refined carbohydrates or sugar, can create a brain fog window that hits about 30 to 90 minutes after eating. What this feels like is suddenly feeling sleepy, unfocused, or mentally dull after lunch or a mid-morning snack, and you might notice that you struggle to concentrate, that words do not come as easily, or that you feel irritable for no clear reason. A clue is to pay attention to what you ate and when the fog rolls in, because if it is consistently happening after meals with bread, pasta, sweets, or sugary drinks, that is a strong signal that your blood sugar is spiking and then crashing. A swap here is to add protein and healthy fat to any meal that includes carbohydrates, because that slows down the sugar release and keeps your brain fueled more steadily. And many of my patients tell me that making this one change clears up their afternoon fog almost completely. Now, let me pay off that medication timing question I promised you earlier, because this is one of the most overlooked triggers of memory fog, and it is entirely fixable once you know what to ask. Many common medications have side effects that include drowsiness, mental slowing, or difficulty with concentration, and this includes certain antihistamines, sleep aids, pain medications, and other prescriptions that are very commonly used. The problem is that most people take their medications at the same time every day without ever considering whether the sedating effect might be hitting at the exact moment they need to be mentally sharp. Here is the question I want you to write down or remember. Could any of my current medications be most sedating at the time of day when my memory feels worst? That is the question to bring to your pharmacist or your doctor, because sometimes the solution is as simple as shifting the timing, taking a medication at night instead of in the morning, or asking whether there is a less sedating alternative. I am not suggesting anyone stop or change their medications without professional guidance, but I am saying that this conversation is worth having because I have seen many patients whose memory fog improved dramatically once we adjusted when or what they were taking. Now here is another trigger that most people miss entirely, and in a moment I am going to ask you to do a quick check with me. Hearing strain is one of the sneakiest bandwidth stealers there is, because when you cannot hear clearly, your brain has to work much harder to fill in the gaps, to guess at words, to piece together meaning from incomplete sound, and that extra effort eats into your mental resources. What this looks like is feeling exhausted after conversations, asking people to repeat themselves, or finding that group settings feel overwhelming and draining. But here is the part that surprises most people. When you miss a word or forget part of a conversation, it often gets labeled as a memory problem when it was really a hearing problem all along. You cannot remember what you never fully heard. A clue is to notice whether you do better in quiet one-on-one settings than in noisy environments with multiple voices, because that suggests your ears are struggling to separate signal from noise. Here is a quick check I want you to try with me right now. Cover one ear with your hand for just a few seconds and notice whether you feel an immediate strain in trying to follow along, because that gives you a tiny glimpse into what your brain experiences when hearing is compromised. If you have not had a hearing check recently, or if you have been putting off looking into hearing aids, this is worth prioritizing because improving your hearing often improves your memory scores in ways that surprise both patients and their families. Now, take a slow breath in, and on the exhale, let your eyes relax and look at something far away from the screen for about 5 seconds. Just let your vision soften and breathe out slowly, because this is a brain bandwidth reset that gives your visual system a break and allows your mind to settle for a moment. You just gave your brain a tiny rest. And this matters because visual strain is another trigger that most people do not connect to memory. If your home has dim lighting, if you are squinting at screens or books, if there is glare on surfaces or low contrast that makes it hard to read labels and signs, your brain is constantly burning extra energy just to see, and that leaves less fuel for thinking and remembering. What this feels like is eye strain, headaches, or a kind of foggy fatigue that worsens in the afternoon or evening, especially if you have been reading or watching screens for extended periods. A clue is to notice whether you feel mentally sharper in well-lit environments or during bright daylight, because if so, your lighting at home might be quietly draining your cognitive reserves. A swap here is to add brighter, warm lighting in one key area where you spend time, because increasing light levels can measurably reduce the strain on your brain and make recall feel easier. I want you to comment below right now and tell me if any of these triggers has hit home so far. Just type "found it" and let me know which one resonated with you, because I read these comments and it helps me understand what is most useful. Also, if you are finding this helpful, tap the like button because it really does help other people find this information, and subscribe if you want more practical videos like this one. Now, while we are on the topic of things your doctor can check, There are a few common nutritional and hormonal issues that are well known to cause memory fog, and they are easy to test for with basic lab work. Low vitamin B12 is one of the most common, especially in people over 60, and it can cause fatigue, mental slowing, and difficulty with recall. Low iron levels and thyroid imbalances can do the same thing, and the tricky part is that these issues often creep up slowly enough that you do not notice the change until it is pointed out. A clue here is if you have been feeling fatigued, cold, sluggish, or mentally dull for a while without a clear explanation. And if you have not had these labs checked recently, it is reasonable to ask your doctor to include them in your next blood work. The good news is that if one of these is the culprit, correcting it often brings noticeable improvement in both energy and memory, and it feels like someone turned the lights back on. One of the biggest bandwidth stealers I see in my patients is something that does not show up on any lab test, and that is stress combined with what I call having too many tabs open. When your mind is juggling worries, responsibilities, appointments, and mental to-do lists, you are essentially running your brain like a computer with dozens of browser tabs competing for resources, and none of them run smoothly. What this feels like is walking into a room and forgetting why, losing track of what you were saying mid-sentence, or feeling mentally scattered, even when nothing particularly difficult is happening. Anxiety and rushing make it worse, and multitasking, which we often think makes us efficient, actually fragments attention and impairs memory formation. A clue is to notice whether your memory is worse during busy or stressful periods and better when you are relaxed and unhurried, because if so, the problem is not your memory hardware, it is the software load you are putting on it. A simple swap is to offload some of those mental tabs onto paper. Write things down. Keep a notepad where you can dump your to-do list out of your brain, and stop trying to remember everything. Your brain was designed to think, not to be a storage locker. And when you free it from the job of holding on to every little thing, you will notice that recall feels easier. Another hidden trigger that most people overlook is chronic pain and low-grade inflammation, because anything that keeps part of your brain occupied with discomfort takes resources away from concentration and memory. This includes obvious things like joint pain or back pain, but it also includes subtler sources like dental discomfort, mouth inflammation from gum issues, or persistent sinus congestion that you have learned to ignore. What this feels like is difficulty focusing, mental fatigue, or a kind of fog that seems unrelated to anything in particular. But if you stop and scan your body, you might notice an ache or pressure that has just become background noise. A clue is to ask yourself whether there is any area of your body that is persistently uncomfortable, even at a low level, because that might be pulling more bandwidth than you realize. Addressing pain with appropriate treatment, taking care of dental issues you have been putting off, or clearing up chronic sinus problems can free up mental resources and make your thinking feel clearer. Now, I promised to come back to those 3 words I gave you earlier. So let us see how your brain is doing with this little exercise. Without looking back, can you recall the 3 words I asked you to remember? Take a moment and see if they come back to you. The words were apple, table, and penny. And if you remembered all 3, that is a good sign that your working memory is doing its job even while you were taking in new information. If you forgot 1 or 2, do not worry at all. Because this was not a test and there is no score, it was simply a way to notice how your brain handles multitasking, and many people find that when they reduce their bandwidth stealers, these little memory tasks get easier. Now, let me give you the tiny home change I mentioned at the beginning, because this one is simple and surprisingly powerful. The idea is to reduce cognitive load in your environment by creating what I call a launch pad, which is just a single bowl or tray by your door where you always put your keys, wallet, glasses, and anything else you need when you leave the house. The reason this works is that every time you have to search for something, you are using bandwidth. And when you remove that search by having a single consistent spot, you free up that mental energy for actual thinking. Many of my patients tell me this one change eliminated the daily stress of hunting for keys or glasses. and it made them feel sharper because they were not starting each day with a small drain on their resources. You can expand this idea by labeling one drawer in your kitchen for items you frequently misplace, or by keeping a notepad by the phone to write down messages or reminders immediately instead of trying to hold them in your head. These are not fancy tricks. They are simple ways to work with your brain instead of against it, and they add up to a real improvement in how you feel and function. Here is a gentle 7-day approach you can start today, and it does not require perfection or rigid rules, just a little curiosity about what might be affecting your bandwidth. Pick 2 of the triggers we talked about today, the ones that felt most relevant to your own experience, and make one small change related to each for the next week. Maybe you add brighter lighting in your living room and start keeping a notepad by the phone, or maybe you adjust your meal timing and bring that medication question to your pharmacist. At the same time, pay attention to the time of day when your fog is worst, because this pattern is incredibly useful information to share with your doctor if you decide to have that conversation. Most people find that their memory fog is not random. It tends to cluster around certain times, and that clustering often points directly to the trigger. If you notice your fog is worst in the afternoon, think about blood sugar, medication timing, or visual strain from screen use. If it is worst in the morning, consider sleep quality or dehydration overnight. If it is worst in noisy environments, hearing might be the issue. This kind of pattern recognition is powerful, and it puts you in control instead of leaving you wondering what is happening. I want you to comment below and tell me 2 things. What time of day does your memory feel worst? And which trigger from today surprised you most? I read every comment, and I learn so much from hearing about your experiences. One more thing before you go. If you ever notice that memory changes are sudden, worsening significantly, or affecting your safety, that is worth a conversation with your doctor to make sure nothing else is going on. But for the many people whose memory slips are caused by these everyday bandwidth stealers, I want you to know that there is genuine hope and a clear path forward. You are not powerless here. Small changes, made consistently, can bring real improvements in how clearly you think and how easily you recall. Your brain is not broken, it is just overloaded, and once you start clearing some of those drains, you may be surprised at how sharp you feel again.